Chapter 161, The Transaction. On the other end of the Den Mushi, after a long, tense silence, the answer Kane wanted finally came. All right, we agree to your terms. Satan Saint's voice was like gravel squeezed through clenched teeth. When will you release them? Don't be so hasty. I have one small additional request. Kane flicked at an imaginary speck of dust with his nail, as casual as if he were commenting on the weather. Kane, don't push your luck. Satan Saint's voice snapped, furious. Do you really think that with a few captives you can hold the world government to ransom forever? Know your place. An invisible pressure seemed to press through the shell of the Den Mushi. The air on the deck thickened. Kane only relaxed further. Relax. It's a small request, truly a trifle for you. He kept that maddeningly easy tone. I have a few friends who were unfortunate enough to be invited to impel down by the Marines. I want them released. Heh. Satan Saint almost laughed in disbelief. Demand that the world government hand people over? And a few at that? He would have refused outright if not for Peter Saint's intervention. Names. We need to assess their threat to the world government. Kane grinned. Even the Gorosei had some bureaucracy. No problem. He rattled off the names. Dori, Brogi, Kashi, and Oimo. He'd planned to break in to impel down to rescue them, but hadn't expected the Marines and their own admirals to deliver them so conveniently. Misfortune turned into an opportunity. Killing Marine captives didn't fit his plan. Losing 2 admirals would damage the Marines' power, but wouldn't topple the world government while Aimu still lived. It would only provoke a desperate retaliation. He wasn't ready to be the rebellious overlord. He needed to appear reasonable now, to strengthen himself and convince the Gorosei he had no intent to overthrow them. There was a brief pause on the line while the Gorosei pulled the names from memory, 4 giants recently captured by the Marines. Kane, your circle of friends is extensive, Satan Saint said slowly. He had not expected Kane to have influence reaching the giant race and a connection with the captain of the giant warrior pirates. In the room of authority, do we exchange? Satan Saint asked his colleagues. He wasn't worried about the combat ability of a few giants. 1 admiral could handle them. The issue was whether to let Kane win the giants' favor. The other Gorosei exchanged looks and decided. Exchange. Nusuro Saint's sword thudded against the floor. Even if we refuse, Kane could make a fuss about us detaining the Elbaf warriors, or go to Elbaf and play the savior, winning the giants' support. That would be worse. Agreed, Warcury Saint added. But this is the absolute bottom line. He must be explicitly warned the world government will not tolerate endless blackmail. That's final. Satan Saint reconnected the line and delivered their decision. Khan tutted as if disappointed. Seeing the others' temper fray, he chose to keep the upper hand and chuckled. Fine. Since I'm being so generous, deal. Release them immediately. Satan Saint's voice iced over. Do you take me for an idiot? Kidnappers at least exchange prisoners and payment at the same time. Kane's reply was brisk. In 5 days, I want to see them and the complete data at the place I designate. Otherwise, he elongated the threat, I'll have to deal with a few less important people on my end. Too many captives take up space. 5 days? Impossible. That's... Satan Saint's protest cracked off as the line went dead. Kane had hung up on him. Satan Saint's face went bright with fury. No one had ever hung up on him mid-sentence. He crushed the arm of his sofa with a snap. Calm down, Satan Saint. Peter Saint shook his head. He already captured Marine admirals and bargained with us face to face. What's hanging up a Den Mushi? Warcury's eyes flashed cold. We can't be entirely passive. Prepare a contingency. Have Kizaru escort the giants and the data. His speed is the only guarantee of timely arrival. Give him a secret order. If any opportunity arises at the scene, capture Kane on sight, whatever the cost. Agreed, the others answered. The Gorosei were happy to sign a surface agreement while preparing darker contingencies. Kane put down the Den Mushi and, without pause, dialed another number. The receiver rang for a long time before a slurred, heavily drunk roar came through. Uororo, who dares disturb my drinking? Kane could almost smell the alcohol through the line. How diligent the Gorosei were, answering immediately. He grinned. The future of the beast's pirates depended on hard-working talent like himself. Teacher Kai, stop drinking. Big job. He summarized the deal and his reasons for setting a tight 5-day deadline. Morgan's latest intelligence showed the warship escorting Dory and the others hadn't reached Impel Down yet. The fastest return would be about 5 days, too tight for reinforcements from Marineford or the God's Knights. Still, Kane called for backup. Uororo. Well done, Kane. Kaido's drunken voice brightened the moment Kane mentioned the artificial devil fruit data. The fog left his eyes, and excitement took over. I'll leave with Judge right away. Kaido hung up impatiently after getting the coordinates. King, who had been listening, looked at Kane with astonishment under his mask. Kane had produced a windfall on a single excursion. King stood abruptly. Mr. Kaido, please allow me to accompany you. With King and Kaido together, even the full force of Marineford would be manageable. That's what we'll do, Kaido bellowed, deciding at once. He left the day-to-day running of Onigashima to Queen, revealed his Azure Dragon form right there, ripped a huge hole through the room as he took off. King shifted into a Pteranodon and followed. After picking up Judge, the three streaked toward the sky. At Marineford, Fleet Admiral Sengoku froze, Den Mushi trembling in his hand. Satan Saint's voice had been merciless. All because of Marine incompetence, he had thundered, blaming the Marines for the disaster. For 10 minutes, Sengoku could only stand and endure the reprimand. The Marines' budget and fate lay in the Gorosei's hands. Finally, the Gorosei returned to a calm tone and issued orders. Let Borsalino handle the handover. We understand. Sengoku acknowledged the order, then passed on a piece of relief the Gorosei hadn't expected. The Marines had another force near Water 7. In the Grand Line, 4 massive Marine warships cut through the waves toward a small, obscure island. On each deck, bound like mountains, were the 4 captured giants. The fleet commander, Vice Admiral Red King, answered a ringing Den Mushi and, moments later, barked orders. Mission change. Cancel the escort to Impel Down. All ships, change course, and proceed at full speed to the target island. The 4 ships swung wide wakes as they altered course. Dory felt the shift and wondered why they were no longer heading to Impel Down. Maybe the Marines planned to execute them at sea. He shrugged and shouted for wine. Brogy, Kashi, and Oimo joined in, their voices filling the decks as if they were revelers at a feast rather than condemned prisoners. A Marine corporal scolded them red-faced. Address Vice Admiral Red King properly. You prisoners have no right to make demands. Dory laughed, shaking his chains. Come on, little Marine brother. Don't be stingy. We're all going to die. Give us a last drink. Red King, aware of the hidden forces at play, only scolded them to keep up appearances. He wouldn't tell these giants the truth. Better they suffer a few days' uncertainty. On a nameless, desolate island that didn't appear on most maps, Kane had chosen the meeting spot for the transaction. The 2 admirals and 5 vice admirals were here, guarded personally by Kane. He stood by the beach, where a simple spit of branches held a huge sea beast leg, turning golden over the coals. Fat hissed and sputtered. The smell of roasting meat rolled over the sand. Directly opposite him, the Marine prisoners sat, sea stone shackles biting into them. Even hardened officers had empty stomachs after days with little food. As prisoners, they had no claim to the meat and watched hungrily. Perfectly cooked, Kane said, tossing spices on the meat. He tore off a crispy, tender leg and ate with bold, unrefined pleasure. He showed no sign of stress. Rather, he seemed to enjoy the moment. On the horizon, black dots resolved into ships and drew closer. Kane glanced through binoculars. 2 figures stood prominently on the bow of the lead ship, a lanky man in a yellow and white striped suit and an old, massively built man with white hair. Kizaru Borsalino and Garp the Fist. They apparently saw him too. Their gazes met across the sea. Kane set the binoculars down and waved with a grease-stained hand, casual and almost friendly. It was an odd scene, not kidnapper and captors, but old acquaintances meeting after a long separation. Not long after, a massive fleet of over 20 Marine warships, like moving steel mountains, slowly closed on the nameless island. Aside from 5 ships specially equipped to carry giants, the rest were the battleships Sakazuki had taken when he set out earlier. They hadn't been used in the previous war, but now they were arriving right on cue to rendezvous with Borsalino and his group. Before the fleet even moored, it had already formed into a tight line on the sea. Countless cannon muzzles were trained on the little island, a murderous aura hanging over sea and sky as if ready to wipe it off the map at the first sign of trouble. On the shore, Borsellino and Garp were the first ashore, followed by a squad of elite Marines carrying two heavy, tightly sealed metal boxes. "Long time no see, old man Garp, and Mr. Borsellino," Kane greeted. Kane stepped forward with an overly friendly smile. "Have you eaten? If you don't mind, I've got some freshly roasted meat. Tastes pretty good." "Thanks, but I'm trying to lose weight these days," Borsellino replied with an exaggerated wave, pinching a non-existent belly and worrying like a man in midlife crisis. "You know how it is. Middle age packs it on. I feel like my attractiveness is on sale." He glanced at Kane with envy. "So, little brother Kane, I hear you're very popular with women. Any special tricks? Teach me." Kane shrugged. "Simple. If you like a girl, ask her out to dinner." The trick, of course, relied heavily on looks. Borsellino's gaze swept Kane's handsome face and tall frame, then he twisted his mouth and gave up trying to learn the technique. While they bantered, Garp stood with arms crossed, face drained of color, saying nothing. Seeing Sakazuki, Kuzan, and several other vice admirals heavily restrained with sea-stone chains and looking disheveled had him barely able to contain a volcanic surge of anger. After a few casual remarks, Borsellino leaned in and got to business, pushing up his sunglasses. "We've brought both the people and the data. According to our agreement, shall we make the exchange?" "No rush," Kane said calmly. "First, I must make sure my friends are all right." "Fine." Borsellino signaled into a Den Mushi. Under the escort of Vice Admiral Red King, 4 giants, bound tight like Zongzi, were hauled down from a ship. Dory saw Kane standing casually on the beach, and his enormous face brightened, then darkened. "Kane, were you captured too?" Kane's mouth twitched. "No, quite the opposite. I'm here to take you home." He turned to Borsellino. "Release my friends first." No. Borsellino wagged a finger and smiled. "An exchange follows the rules, 1 for 1. That's the basis of an honest transaction." The two sides quickly reached agreement. Vice admirals for giants. When the giants learned Kane had captured marine admirals to trade for them, they burst into tears like children, snot and all. Kane patted one arm and another shoulder to comfort them. The 5 marine vice admirals, their sea-stone cuffs removed, burned with shame and humiliation. An operation that should have been smooth had turned into embarrassment and failure. "I'm sorry. We were incompetent. We failed to meet headquarters expectations and couldn't capture Kane's group." Gion, a candidate for admiral, said first, voice strained. The other 4 vice admirals bowed their heads in unison. Garp let out a booming laugh and crossed his arms. "What nonsense. So you lost once. Big deal. Heads up, all of you." If he had died every time he'd lost, he'd have died many times over. Borsellino asked about the final part of the exchange. The 2 admirals still hadn't been returned. "Don't rush," Kane said with a mysterious smile, pointing up at the clouded sky. "The grand finale, shouldn't it be here?" Before he finished, the thick clouds were torn apart like a curtain by brute force. A monstrously huge dragon head burst through, cold vertical pupils sweeping down over the tiny crowd and the ships. "Scary, huh?" Borsellino stroked his stubbled chin, lazy tone sharpening. "Our exchange actually attracted the pirate emperor himself?" Kane smiled. "The feeling's mutual. No pretense between old foxes." "Kaido, King, and Vinsmoke Judge," Borsellino called, listing names with exaggerated astonishment. "All famous big shots. You wouldn't be thinking of using this chance to wipe us out, would you?" "Worororo, that sounds like a good idea." Kaido pulled a ferocious grin and drew his beloved spiked club. Garp clenched his fist and stepped forward. "If you want to fight, this old man's ready anytime." Kane inwardly scolded himself for calling Kaido, then quickly raised his voice to prevent escalation. "Hey, no fighting right now. We're here to do business." Fortunately, both sides restrained themselves and the provocation didn't erupt into battle. Kane turned to Judge. "Judge, check those 2 boxes of data." Judge, who specialized in biology and materials science, was the obvious choice to verify the boxes. For 2.5 tense hours, the sides stood off, Marines and pirates arrayed on opposite ends of the beach, eyes sharp and wary. Finally, Judge looked up from the open boxes, barely able to hide his excitement. "The data's valid." The rest was simple. 1 box of data for 1 admiral. And that unpleasant chief petty officer became an extra in the exchange. The transaction concluded. Kaido didn't waste words. He shifted into an azure dragon, his flame cloud enveloping the 4 giants in the 2 boxes. then with a sweep of his dragon tail shot into the sky and vanished into the clouds. Kane and King followed close behind. They fly fast. Borsalino shaded his eyes as their figures shrank. Old man, shall we act? Garp's mouth stretched into a wild, battle-ready grin. Time to say goodbye. He coiled, the sand under his feet groaning, and shot into the sky like a human cannonball. His thick right arm pulled back as Haki surged into his iron fist. Fist bone impact! At the same moment, Borsalino dissolved into countless dazzling golden light particles, materializing high in the sky beside Garp. He crossed his arms in front of his chest, thumb and index forming an O as points of light condensed inside. Yasakani no Magatama. What followed was a terrifying shockwave that split the sky, black and red lightning braided with a torrent of golden light bullets, like meteors in midair. In an instant, the barrage caught up with Kaido and the others. Couldn't we end this transaction peacefully? Must we make a scene? Kane, flying at the rear to cover their retreat, sighed and slowly turned. Facing the fused assault of two top marine forces, he narrowed his eyes and opened his dragon maw. Immense energy and his conqueror's Haki converged. Dragon Pulse, a thick, solid shockwave, wreathed in black and red lightning, blasted from his mouth and met the combined marine attack head-on. Boom! The three forces collided in midair with a thunderous roar, tearing at the sky itself. The explosion echoed through the heavens, and even marines below felt their eardrums sting. A fierce blast swept across like a tsunami, buffeting the giants wrapped in flame clouds and nearly knocking them off their feet. Such power! Brogy steadied himself, shock written across his massive face. The other giants nodded in agreement. King beat his wings to resist the air blast, eyes wide under his mask. A combined attack from the marine hero and a marine admiral, if it were him, even with Lunarian defenses, he'd only be able to dodge. Kane, meeting it head-on, hinted at strength rivaling Kaido's. Kaido simply laughed. Worororo. Did you see that, King? Kane surprises me every time. Kane grinned in the air. Rude not to return a present. Since you sent such a warm farewell gift, I'll send one back. He flicked his claw toward the sky, didn't wait to see the effect, and sped after Kaido without hesitation. Garp and Borsalino had no intention of pursuing. Their gazes shifted skyward with sudden solemnity. Old man, didn't I just sense that? Borsalino's lazy tone contained an unusual edge. Prepare yourselves. Garp's expression turned grave. They didn't have long to wait. The clear blue above shifted to a crimson hue. Every marine who had been at Kane's encirclement felt their pupils shrink and their faces drain of color. Not again, someone screamed. Soldiers pointed upward in terror. Dozens of colossal meteors, tails trailing flame, were hurtling toward their sea and the small island beneath the blood-red sky. Sakazuki and Kuzan, recently freed of their sea-stone cuffs, exchanged a look, then used moonwalk and shot after the meteors. They couldn't allow those rocks to land intact. Meteors were still just stones to two Logia users. Even injured and weakened after 5 days, each could take one down with a single punch. Along with Garp and Borsalino already in the sky, the 4 marine heavy hitters formed a net of destruction. Boom, boom, boom. One after another, the meteors shattered under their blows, exploding into countless fragments that rained down like dense hail. Most splashed into the sea, sending towering columns of water skyward. Some struck the deserted island, leaving craters across its surface. Although spectacular, the meteor shower caused no substantial losses under the combined might of the 4. On the pocked beach, Borsalino stared at the island, for once dropping his cynical smirk as he stroked his chin. You know, I kind of wonder if I should have eaten a mythical zoanberry back then. Facing Kane, he always felt Logia was losing its edge. Sakazuki and Kuzan ignored him and went straight to the main ship's conference room. Along with the 5 captured vice admirals, they gave Sengoku a brief, matter-of-fact report. And that's how it happened. Sakazuki's fists were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Next time, I'll capture Kane's group completely. He didn't make excuses nor dwell on failure. Results mattered. The others were silent, but their resolute looks said they felt the same. Sengoku's voice remained steady as he let out a faint sigh of relief. I trust your abilities. This setback was largely due to faulty intelligence. Your primary task now is to heal and recover. We'll handle everything once you return to headquarters. After ending the call with his subordinates, Sengoku immediately dialed upward to the top of the red line. The Gorosei waited for a detailed battle report. In the room of authority, after listening to Sengoku's account, the Gorosei's faces showed faint relief, but kept a stern set. "It seems we worried too much. Kane is not some unstoppable lamp," one said. "But we must not be complacent. No matter how he did it, he defeated and captured a Marine Admiral one-on-one. That level of power can shake the balance of the seas. That reminds me of someone. Another Rox? Humph. What of Rox? Didn't he fall to Emu? That's true, but if every threat requires Emu to act, doesn't that show us as incompetent? Don't worry. His devil fruit doesn't match the records, and the Davy family was wiped out at God Valley by our hand. He can't be tied to that history. The trajectory of fate is set. He's just a slightly stronger ant in a vast chronicle. To be absolutely safe, we must eliminate him as soon as possible. Then raise the research priority on the Pacifista and Seraphim projects. According to design specs, they will become the government's most powerful weapons to rule the seas. Seconded. Seconded. Chapter 163, Vegapunk, Handover of Spoils New World. Punk Hazard. This island, untouched by Sakazuki and Kuzan's battle for the Admiral Post, still pulsed with life. Thick vegetation carpeted the land, and at the island's core stood a heavily guarded, futuristic marine research fortress. Deep inside, in a brightly lit, top-tier laboratory, crowded with precision instruments and flickering screens, a man with an extraordinary physique stands before a complex console. He's over 15 meters tall, but what marks him most is his enormous head, so large it makes up almost his entire height, like a massive light bulb perched on a spindly body. This is Dr. Vegapunk, the scientist hailed as possessing the world's greatest brain. His gnarled, almost avian fingers dance across the keyboard with blinding speed, inputting a string of complicated commands. Opposite him, 6 silver metal spheres are lined up and linked by thick data cables. As Vegapunk enters the commands, the indicator lights on the spheres pulse like living things, blinking in a precise rhythm. Progress looks good. He pauses, wipes his smooth forehead with his sleeve, and judges. If nothing interferes, the core program should be finished in about 3 months. As he wipes the sweat, his immensely heavy head tips his slender neck, and he nearly loses his balance. "Oh no, Doctor!" Research assistants who had been watching rush forward. It takes several of them to barely support his head. "Phew. Thank you all. Much obliged." Vegapunk exhales, still shaken. Falling isn't the worst thing. He worries most about injuring his brain. He frowns, then mutters, "The balance problem keeps getting worse. I really need to study this. Maybe find a reliable way to detach my head and house it separately." That outrageous idea gets no ridicule from the room. For anyone else, it would sound ludicrous. But this is Vegapunk, the man whose technology is 500 years ahead. For him, it's not impossible, just another problem to solve. Just then, a CP agent in a white suit cuts the atmosphere with a brisk stride. He approaches and respectfully offers an encrypted Den Mushi. "Doctor, Satan Saint has an urgent communication and requests to speak with you directly." Vegapunk takes it without hesitation. "Understood. Prioritize resources to the Pacifista and Seraphim projects." A moment later, he hangs up, expression unreadable, and hands the Den Mushi back. As he does, a curious professional question slips out, the kind of idle interest scientists have in the world's goings-on. Has the world government run into new trouble? Why the hurry? The CP agent replies plainly, "This is not a secret to someone of Vegapunk's standing." "Yes, Doctor. It's Calamity Kane of the Beast's Pirates. He defeated and captured Admirals Sakazuki and Kuzan. The world government wants a stronger deterrent." Vegapunk nods absently and turns back to his work, but a tiny, almost imperceptible glint flashes in his eyes. The young man Stussy warned him about. Has he grown that much? Several days later, after continuous flight across the sky, Wano Country rears up from a curtain of waterfalls. Onagashima's main hall receives Kane and his crew. They are here to hand over their spoils. Kane wastes no words. He gives Judge and Queen the artificial devil fruit data and the blueprints for seastone inlay techniques, respectively. Then, under everyone's gaze, he lays 2 ancient-looking blueprints on the table. Judge and Queen freeze. "Can ships really be designed like this?" Judge breathes. "Where did you get these blueprints?" Queen asks. The 2 plans focus on different ends. one on long-distance navigation and the other on destructive capability, but both are packed with nearly incomprehensible technical detail. By their appearance, they seem ancient. "This is a device from Sky Island," Kane says, pointing at the navigation blueprint. "It's said to be capable of space travel." He keeps the second blueprint, the Pluton design, close to his chest. "Ancient weapons are too provocative. The fewer who know, the better." "How confident are you that we can reproduce them?" Kane asks. Judge and Queen exchange looks that reveal equal parts reverence and frustration. Neither wants to lose face in front of their old ally, but the truth is clear. "Short term, it's extremely difficult, practically impossible," Judge admits, breaking the silence. He taps the margins, full of unfamiliar terms. "Many of the materials named here, the principles at their core, they're new to me. To replicate them, we'd have to fully understand every design aspect and core logic from scratch. It's only a little better than starting from zero." Kane's brow tightens. "So these blueprints are useless?" Judge shakes his head, and the investigative spark of a scientist lights up his face. "Not useless. The value for reference is enormous. We can draw inspiration, learn design ideas, energy transmission methods, structural approaches. If we can decipher even parts of it, it could be enough to give the Beast's pirates shipbuilding a leap forward." Queen eagerly chimes in, "And I can adapt the weapons designs to upgrade the firepower on our ships. Output would jump several grades." Kane nods. This gives him experience and possibly future leverage over Pluton. He recommends Wapol, the prodigy of material science, to the two. Under curious eyes, Wapol swallows scraps of metal, chews loudly, and spits out a brand new alloy. Judge and Queen stare, green with envy. "There's actually someone who can do this?" they mutter. Material science is notoriously slow. Developing a new material can take over a decade from lab to mass production. Wapol's ability to accelerate the process by literally digesting and reforming elements is a miracle. "I want him," Judge lunges. "No, he's mine," Queen roars, blocking Judge like a wall. They shove, the scene threatening to get out of hand as they bicker and jockey for Wapol. Wapol cowers in the corner, trembling like a servant between two patrons. Kane steps in, placing a hand on each of them and separates them effortlessly. "Take turns, 1 day each, fair and even." The two grumble but accept the compromise, snorting in annoyed synchrony. Wapol's silent protests are ignored as Judge and Queen flank him, dragging him toward the labs. When the others leave, only Kaido, Kane, and King remain in the main room. Kaido sits in the throne-like chair and breaks the silence, his huge voice throbbing like distant thunder. "Kid, it's time to honor our agreement, isn't it? Let the Beast's pirates belong to you." King locks his masked gaze onto Kane, every muscle coiled like a drawn blade. Kane, however, gently shakes his head. "Teacher Kaido, please wait. If I were to take over the Beast's pirates now, the world government's nerves would snap taut." Kaido halts for a moment, then erupts into booming laughter that rattles dust from the pillars. "You really think my crew is a platter you can eat whenever you like?" He's not angry so much as amused, and a little impressed. "Naturally," Kane answers with unhidden confidence. "If I didn't believe I could beat the world's strongest, why would I want to sit on the throne and rule the world?" Those words, "rule the world," land like a boulder in King's chest. He watches Kane, the young man he once trained in hockey, and finds himself lost for a moment. The kid he steered is now looking higher than him. King steels himself. To stand above Kaido, he must first defeat Kaido. Kaido snorts and grabs a sake gourd, tilting back and taking several deep swigs as he laughs until he cries. "Rule the world? Ha! Once someone said the same thing." Kane continues, steady and unflinching. "Before I can wield absolute power and withstand any retaliation, I have to grow in secret. I won't make Wano another God Valley." Though Kane isn't of the Davy family and likely won't draw Imu's direct attention, he argues for caution. Better to be ready than reckless. Kaido's laughter dies away like a storm passing. Young people, still talking about God Valley?" "I know a little," Kane replies. "I wanted to ask you, Teacher Kaido, what really happened at God Valley?" Kane's transmigration means he missed the end of the God Valley arc. Now that a participant stands before him, he takes the chance to pry. Kaido scrutinizes him, then asks, "What do you know?" Kane spreads his hands, unable to hold back a smile. The Marines say Garp single-handedly crushed the Rock's pirates and saved countless innocents, so he's a hero. But from what I've found, that isn't the whole truth. There are records that the Celestial Dragons invaded God Valley on their triennial study tour. Rox went to rescue people, and, of course, his crew liked the Celestial Dragon's treasure. But that's not the core of it. He fixes Kaido with a steady stare. What I want to know is the full story of how Rox, Whitebeard, Charlotte Linlin, you, plus Garp and Roger, 6 people together, fought against Satan's Saint, who was possessed by a shadow. King's pupils widen. He knows who Satan's Saint is, an ominous figure, and he's stunned that a single force required 6 near-pinnacle fighters to fight it. Kaido studies Kane, then lets his gaze drift as if back to that battlefield. Even that secret? You dug it up? No wonder you watch the world government so carefully, Kaido says. His voice softens, distant. I don't know everything about what that thing was, but it was the world government's deepest secret. It wasn't defenseless. The 6 of us shattered its body the first time, but it didn't matter. It had a truly immortal body. Chapter 164, A Giant's Wano Country Experience. Immortality? Kaido turned instinctively toward Kane, his usually steady, sharp eyes suddenly full of shock and confusion. Could something like that really exist in this world? If it did, who could possibly stand against the world government? But Kane's face remained unchanged. No surprise, no confusion, not even fear, as if he had known it all along. His behavior reminded Kaido of an old acquaintance. Kane, you're not a Davy Race member, are you? Kaido asked. Of course not, Kane replied flatly, steering the conversation back. What happened after that? How did the battle end? Kaido drifted into memories. That shadow pierced rocks. It used a technique, something like shadow control, and turned him into a demon puppet. Under the shadow's will, he turned his spear and started a massacre. And then, what happened after that? Kane pressed. I found an opportunity to retreat, or Kaido said, snorting coldly. Irritation and a hint of anger colored his tone. Anger at Kane's persistent questioning, and at his own powerless younger self who could only run away back then. Kane was taken aback. He hadn't expected that to be the final outcome. Thinking about it, though, it made sense. Among those monsters at God Valley, Kaido had been little different from a rookie just starting out. If not for his youthful pride and desire to show off his newly acquired Azure Dragon ability to his captain, he wouldn't have thrown himself into one of the world's top battles. Kane sighed inwardly. Further questioning would get him nowhere. He said nothing more, bowed to part, and left the room. Silence fell between Kaido and King. After a long moment, Kaido looked toward the door where Kane had gone and spoke with a complex tone. King, do you think this kid Kane could be that legendary Joy Boy? King didn't hesitate. His answer was immediate and devout, like that of a most loyal follower. Mr. Kaido, in my heart, the only one who can be Joy Boy is you. And it will always be you, he added silently and solemnly. Outside, on the wide plaza before Onigashima's main building, Kane met his waiting companions and the 4 giant friends who stood like small mountains. All eyes were fixed on the center of the plaza, watching a scene that was less a battle and more a one-sided wrecking. 2 towering dinosaurs had rampaged through the pirate ranks, sending enemies flying like bowling pins. In minutes, it was over. Ha! You're 100 years too early to defeat us. The smaller Pachycephalosaurus laughed arrogantly, its thick skull thudding with every chuckle. Who else is there? The larger Spinosaurus roared, its bone plates slicing the air. So powerful, the giants exclaimed in genuine awe. Individually, these 2 were more than a match for an adult Elbaf warrior. Nice work, Ulti, page 1, Yamato cheered, cupping her hands to her mouth. Damn it, Yamato, only I can call him Xiao Pei. Ulti instantly deactivated her transformation and snapped back into human form, puffing her cheeks and glaring at Yamato. Don't be so petty, Yamato laughed, unfazed. Page 1 was used to his sister's sudden jealousy. He shook his head and then brightened as he spotted someone at the plaza's edge. Brother Kane, you're back! Page 1's face split into a joyful grin. He deactivated his transformation and ran up to Kane. Hey, Xiaopei, wait for me! Ulti, seeing him go, shouted and chased after him. The giants watched the siblings revert to human form and were astonished. By all appearances, they looked like teenagers. Were all members of the Beast's pirates this terrifyingly strong? You've gotten much stronger, Xiao Pei, Kane said, smiling as he encouraged the young man. I haven't slacked off for a single day. Page 1 puffed out his chest. Impressive, Kane said, giving a thumbs up, then asked, Where's Jack? What's he doing now? He's probably training the Fishman unit in the bay on the northeast side of Onigashima, Page 1 replied, pointing toward the Fishman Island immigrant settlement and training grounds. Kane nodded, exchanged a few words with Ulti, and then turned to the four giants. How are you feeling? Have you fully recovered? He asked. Gaba-ba-ba-ba! Absolutely no problem now. Brogy thumped his chest, laughter rolling like thunder. We have you to thank for this, Kane. Dory bowed his massive head, his eyes sincere. Without you, we probably would have rotted away in that dark, sunless place, Impel Down. Kashi and Oimo also bent at the waist, offering the solemn, heartfelt gratitude of the giant race. Without Kane, they couldn't imagine how long the world government would have kept deceiving them. No need for all that, Kane said, waving his hand with a warm smile. Aren't we friends? Among friends, helping each other is natural. That's right, we are friends, the four giants chorused. To them, Kane was the one who had saved their lives, a trusted, reliable friend. Dory then straightened and made a solemn invitation. Kane, we formally invite you to be our guest in Elbaf. Ga-ba-ba-ba! Elbaf is the greatest country in the world. Just thinking about the burning taste of strong liquor there makes my mouth water. Brogy added, rubbing his hands together. Kashi and Oimo nodded enthusiastically. Yamato, at the chance of visiting the legendary giant kingdom, nearly jumped with excitement. Everyone else in the group lit up with hope as they looked to Kane. Who could resist Elbaf? Kane had worked for this very moment. Thank you for the invitation, Kane said with a bright smile. Elbaf, I would be delighted to visit. Fantastic, everyone cheered. However, Kane continued, switching topics, you've only just arrived in Wano Country. Why not stay a few more days? Let me properly host you and show you the sights. The giants had no reason to refuse. Adventure ran in their blood. That was why they had set sail years ago to become the giant warrior pirates. Dory then raised a thick finger, pointing to a group in the distance, the Bahanza, brute giants, dozens of meters taller than the others. By the way, Kane, what's the deal with those giants? When they first came to Onigashima, they'd thought the Bahanza might be a new generation of Elbaf pirates. But attempts to talk had failed. Their intelligence seemed limited, more like the level of young giants. Kane followed Dory's pointing and explained calmly. Those are ancient giant warriors, artificially created by the world government to exploit the strength of the giant race. They were all failures, intellectually defective, so the world government declared them useless and dumped them on our beast pirates as scrap. It's the world government again. Dory, Brogy, and the others' faces darkened, rage flaring in their large eyes. It confirmed why Elbaf had no love for the world government. Those rulers would commit sacrilegious acts against life for power. Kane didn't need to say more to tar the world government's reputation. Their actions spoke loudly enough. Over the next few days, Kane personally guided the four giants around Wano Country. Everything vibrant on this land captivated his guests from Elbaf. Bustling towns, smoke rising from workshops, vast fields, and dense crops. Sights rare to those who'd spent their lives at sea and to nations that had long isolated themselves. Learning that many of these changes came from Kane's governance, the giants praised him. Kane, you've managed this place really well. Though not highly cultured, they could see that Wano's people had rosy complexions and light-hearted, busy steps, signs of prosperity and peaceful living. A thought quietly bloomed. Perhaps Elbaf could learn from this. Elbaf was hailed as the world's strongest nation, but life there wasn't lavish. They weren't starving, but they didn't enjoy many comforts from the outside world. The giant warrior pirates had emerged partly for adventure and partly to prevent the nation from stagnating. In Flower Capital, where the presence of the Bahanza had long been accepted, the common folk didn't react much to the giants' arrival, only hoping their belongings wouldn't be damaged. But Kane and Yamato instantly drew crowds. Kane, please try my freshly made pancakes, someone called. General Yamato, this is my new wagashi. Please try it, another voice cried. Warm greetings came from all directions, and among the crowd were fishmen and merfolk, now comfortable moving freely, shopping and enjoying the day. Kane smiled as he watched them. "Are you enjoying life here?" he asked. "Thanks to you. Life is excellent." A blue-skinned fishman strongman grinned, showing sharp teeth. "We have houses, and I even found steady, well-paying work at Blade Harbor." An elegant merfolk woman swayed, eyes sparkling. "I never dared dream I could enjoy sunshine and sea breeze without fear of slave traders." "Lord Kane, when will you visit Fishman Island again?" a young fishman asked eagerly. "I want to bring my uncle's family here. This place is too good." Their faces beamed with genuine gratitude. At first, they'd feared Kane might sell them into slavery, but time had replaced that fear with trust. Lord Kane had truly dedicated himself to leading them to a better life. Most reassuring was that on Wano's land, they hardly felt the widespread discrimination common on the open seas. Kane had decreed that anyone who intentionally discriminated against fishmen or merfolk could be arrested and sent to Myanmar for labor re-education. Still, after years of isolation, Wano's people were more curious than prejudiced. "Don't worry," Kane said. "The second phase of the Fishman immigration plan will begin. Everyone, be patient." The giants nearby grew curious. "Oh, are there that many common fishmen and merfolk living here?" They'd assumed the Beast's pirates had only recruited a powerful fishman unit like other crews. Seeing commoners integrated into the community was something different. Kane merely smiled. "To me, whether fishmen, giants, mink, longarm, or others who look different, they're all civilized races that can coexist. They may look different, but their hearts feel the same." "Remarkable thinking," the giant said, deeply moved. If they hadn't already thought Kane didn't fit the giant race's legendary liberator, they might have suspected he was that very figure. Perhaps Kane could guide Elbaf's development. That thought began to take root, like a wild seed finding soil. Chapter 165, The Thriving Den, Den Mushi Breeding Business, heading to Elbaf Wano Country, Kibi. Kane led Hiruluk, Kureha, and Chopper into the lush settlement of the Tontata tribe. Under Princess Manchuri's miraculous cure fruit ability, Hiruluk's terminal illness, previously deemed incurable, was simply gone. "My body feels lighter than ever. I feel young again," Hiruluk cried, unable to contain his excitement. He jumped like a child, reveling in the sudden return of vigor. His gaunt, sickly features had been replaced by a healthy glow. Princess Manchuri watched with a pure, satisfied smile. Bringing health to others was her greatest joy. Chopper, overcome, was already a puddle of tears, every past worry washed away. "Does such a power as the cure fruit really exist?" Kureha asked, but her voice held a complicated undertone. She was genuinely happy for Hiruluk, yet as a doctor, she felt a professional disquiet. If a devil fruit could erase terminal illness so easily, what place would remain for people who dedicated their lives to medicine? Kane seemed to read her thoughts and answered calmly. "The cure fruit is a miracle, but there is only one. Very few will ever benefit from it. For the vast majority of the sick, reliable doctors and effective medicines are their only hope. This world will never be without doctors." He looked at Kureha seriously. "I plan to establish a large medical academy in Wano. I want you to be the dean. You'll train the next generation of doctors and lead research into the diseases we still cannot cure." Kureha studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. I won't let your investment go to waste." After entrusting Kureha with the academy, Kane hurried to the Den Mushi breeding base on the outskirts of Kibi. When he reached the high slope that overlooked the site, even he found himself breathless. The operation below spanned thousands of acres, less a farm than a city devoted to Den Mushi. Row after row of breeding units stretched to the horizon. Tens of thousands of Den Mushi of all sizes and shell patterns crawled within them. The air carried a faint, vegetal scent, part feed, part the creature's own secretions. Tontata teams carried baskets of specially formulated feed, moving with practiced efficiency. Countless Den Mushi craned their heads out and gave contented buru-buru sounds as they fed. Shinobu, a short, sturdy woman and former kunoichi, moved along the rows, occasionally pausing to touch a juvenile Den Mushi. Under the effect of the ripe berry, the youngsters matured in seconds, leaping past months of growth into service-ready adults. Kane stepped into the base. His arrival drew every Tontata eye and Shinobu's attention. "Kane Lando!" they cheered, dropping their work and gathering at the front. Leo puffed out his chest. Kane Lendo, look, thanks to everyone's hard work, we've bred 11,025 Den Mushi, and they're all healthy. Kane bent down, smiling genuinely as he patted several Tontata heads. You've all done outstanding work, far beyond my expectations. You're heroes. He didn't forget Shinobu. You've done well. Shinobu folded her arms and turned away, answering stiffly, I was only keeping my promise. Kane wasn't offended by her coldness. He had patience for talent. From his coat, he produced an antique brass key and casually tossed it to her. Shinobu caught it, frowned, and asked, What is this? For you. Kane's tone was offhand. A house in Flower Capital, near Yamato Castle. Good location and scenery. At first, Shinobu reflexively wanted to refuse. Working for Kane had been a compromise. Accepting a gift would feel like selling out. She tried to push the key back, but Kane interrupted, gentle. What about your brother Ninsuke? I heard he's found a good woman. Wouldn't you want him to start their life in a proper home? That settled it. The siblings had lived in hiding since Shinobu left the Onmyoban to escape Orochi's persecution. Security and comfort had always been scarce. A house near Yamato Castle, tied to Ninsuke's future, was something she couldn't refuse. She exhaled and said, still stiff but softer, I'll pay you back. Then accept it, Kane said with a shrug. He turned back to the farm. Can you handle the current scale with just the Tontata? That's thanks to the hard workers you found, Shinobu said, the word slaves dying on her tongue. Spending months alongside the Tontata had shown her their purity, diligence, and loyalty. If Kane had mistreated them, she might have considered breaking her promise and taking them away. Kane nodded, already deciding the next step. You can't keep shearing the same sheep, he said. Repetitive tasks, transporting feed, cleaning, could be handed off to external crews now that the breeding method was stable. Shinobu, he added, I appoint you deputy manager of the Den Mushi breeding farm. You'll be responsible for expanding capacity. Shinobu's jaw dropped. You're going to expand this scale even more? Of course. Kane's face hardened with purpose. I want 50,000 saleable Den Mushi within a year. And that's just the start. You need to be prepared for more. 50,000 was staggering, but to Kane, it was only the beginning. His true ambition was to make Den Mushi a household necessity across the seas. Demand would be in the tens of millions. Alabasta alone held over 10 million people. Even accounting for replacement cycles and the slow build of sales channels, his initial 50,000 investment was a cautious market test. Even priced conservatively, the revenue potential was astronomical, easily hundreds of billions of berries annually. But Kane wasn't focused on short-term hardware profits. He wanted a massive user base and the platform and derivative businesses that would follow. He was even willing to reduce margins to secure loyalty, treating Den Mushi more like rice than a luxury item. With the breeding farm's affairs arranged, Kane prepared to set sail for Elbaf. Robin's expression clouded as she pointed out a practical obstacle. To reach Elbaf, we have to pass through Red Hair Pirates' territory. Elbaf, the fabled land of giants, was independent and powerful. No crew would presume to rule over it, but its seaways lay squarely within the Red Hair Pirates' domain. The Beast Pirates and the Red Hair Pirates were not friends. Their relationship could at best be described as irreconcilable. Kane smiled calmly. Relax. Shanks is a smart man. He won't do anything foolish. Reality disagreed. As the Rayquaza entered the outer waters of Red Hair territory, a red force materialized and blocked their path. Calamity Kane. Shanks stood at the bow of his ship, wind-fluttered red hair and a stern expression. He gripped his sword hilt tightly, eyes sharp as an eagle's. You've crossed the line. Do you want another full-scale war between our crews? Ben Beckman, Yesop, and the rest of his core cadre were already on edge, staring down the Rayquaza. The look in Yesop and the others' eyes was still hot with an old wound. They hadn't forgotten their vice-captain's severed arm. On the Rayquaza, Yamato, Kazuki Hiyori, and the others stepped forward, matching the Red Hair Pirates' intensity. The air between the two forces condensed, even the waves seemed to hold their breath. It's been a while, Shanks, Kane said coolly. He smiled as if greeting an old acquaintance. No need to be so hostile. I'm only visiting a friend at his invitation. Friend? Who? Shanks' eyes narrowed. These are my giant friends, Kane said, gesturing. 4 giants stood with him, warriors who had come aboard as his guests. They invited me to Elbaf. I accepted. Brother Kane, is it time to fight? Dory and Brogy, who had been away from Elbaf nearly a century, didn't recognize Shanks and assumed they were pirates trying to block their way. They raised their weapons at once to defend their friend. Oimo and Kashi followed suit without hesitation. Beckman almost choked on his cigarette when he saw the giants. He knew the giants' friendship with Shanks well. He had visited Elbaf with his captain and been welcomed there. Now Kane had earned the giants' companionship as well. The idea that the giant race might stand with Kane, even informally, cast an unpredictable shadow over the standoff. The sea held its breath as two proud crews and an island people eyed each other, the future suddenly much less certain than anyone had assumed. Chapter 166, First Arrival at Elbaf. The Red Hair Pirates finally yielded. Whether out of respect for the giant race or simply because it wasn't worth a fight, they had no reason to take on Kane and his crew here and now. Kane, Shanks's voice rode the sea breeze, a clear warning. Remember this, if I ever hear you cause trouble on Elbaf, I won't let you off. Kane answered only with a lazy wave of his hand, and the silhouette of the Rayquaza grew smaller behind him. Beckman's brow tightened. He stepped up to Shanks and lowered his voice. Shanks, just in case, we should contact Jabba and let him know what's happening so he can prepare. Shanks nodded, producing a Den Mushi. After days at sea, the ocean itself began to change. The water grew bluer and noticeably deeper, and the fish that jumped clear of the surface were far larger than usual. Splash! Kane felt a tug on a line and set his strength to it. A huge shadow broke the surface, and a spray of seawater erupted as something enormous thudded onto the main deck. A colossal tuna. Its body was almost as wide as the Rayquaza's deck, and its tail thrashed so hard the whole ship rocked. Wow, so big. I've never seen one like that. Is this the king of tunas? And what sashimi that would make? The crew had seen all kinds of things traveling with Kane, sea kings hundreds of meters long. But a fish like this, an ordinary animal blown up to impossibility, was something else entirely. Brogy laughed, delighted and homesick all at once. Ga ba ba ba. Seeing that means we're very close to Elbaf. He hadn't stopped smiling since the fish was hauled aboard. Even the most adventurous giant always kept a soft spot for home. Sure enough, after another day's sailing, an outline rose from the horizon, growing larger until it filled their vision, the treasure tree atom. Towering. Didn't begin to describe it. The crew craned their necks up and up and up until their throats ached. The trunk kept going, the crown lost in clouds. Kane remembered that the middle and upper reaches of the treasure tree atom held island clouds and sea clouds, the same kind of clouds that held Sky Island. From the distance of the sea, the island kingdom of Elbaf seemed small beside its ingrain. Kane, look, that tree is huge. Yamato grabbed his arm, eyes shining. Eneru, who'd been practicing armament hockey with Kane, was also drawn by the sight, until Kane jabbed him in the gut for a momentary distraction. A liver shot, quick and clean. Ugh! Eneru doubled over, wide-eyed, nearly falling. Kane caught him, helping him stay upright and saving the pride of the self-styled god. Friends! The giant's booming shouts cut through everything. Elbaf! We've arrived! When they reached an appropriate distance, Kashi held a square stone in his hand, pointed toward the middle canopy of the treasure tree atom. He traced an arc from sea surface to treetop. In an instant, a magnificent rainbow bridge bloomed into being, one end anchored at the sea before the Rayquaza, the other set on the giant tree. Wow, so beautiful! Bonnie leaped to her feet, pink hair bouncing. Yamato leaned out over the rail, her eyes glittering. Are we going to walk across it? That's exactly it, Dory said with pride. The moment the Rayquaza touched the rainbow, its bow tilted upward. An invisible current took hold, and the ship began to climb as if it were an escalator turned vertical. Hold on, everyone. Kashi's voice rang out, and the Rayquaza rose along the bridge, sailing into the sky. When the ship met the sea clouds above Sunworld Port, the rainbow faded and dissolved into air. They stepped onto Elbaf, into a land where everything was enormous. The port was huge, the houses enormous, plants and trees and insects and birds of a scale that dwarfed the 100-meter Rayquaza. Above them, a boat some dozens of meters long drifted on island clouds as if it were on calm water. Bonnie squealed. A flying ship, Oimo grinned. A fog boat. It doesn't fly on air. Its oars push through island clouds to give it buoyancy. Dory laughed at the guest's amazement. Gababa, less talking. I can't wait any longer. Brogy patted his belly like a drum. To the tavern. I'm dying to taste the wine again. Kane grinned. Guests follow the host. We're on your land. You lead, and we'll follow. Giants respected frankness. Led by Brogy, they walked toward the port tavern. The giants explained the kingdom's layout as they went. Treasure Tree Atom at the center, and 3 main regions stacked vertically: Heaven Realm, Sun Realm, Underworld. The tree was so vast its roots received almost no sun. The underworld stayed cold and bleak, home to dangerous beasts. Most giants lived in the Sun Realm. You'd best not go near the underworld, Dory warned, before brightening and adding, of course you lot are an exception. Chopper and Violet clutched each other and shivered. Beasts, dangerous even to giants, sounded terrifying. Kane, however, was uninterested. Even if some mountain lord beasts were captured, they wouldn't adapt well to Wano's ecosystem. Kuzan couldn't be asked to build an underworld tundra just for them. The tavern, a massive building with a sign of a clinking wine glass, sat in a small town near the port. Brogy barged in, voice booming before he finished pushing the door. Beverly, give me the strongest rum. Dory, Kashi, and Oimo shouted their orders in turn. Behind the bar, a fresh-faced giant girl looked up, wearing a simple tunic, an apron, and a string of white pearls. She poured Brogy a foaming, potent drink. Beverly is your mama? Someone asked. Brogy tasted and closed his eyes. The flavor hit him like a torch. He swallowed hard and nodded. Still the same. Hasn't changed a bit. The girl smiled. I'm Mato. My mama retired 20 years ago and left this place to me. You are. At that moment, a middle-aged giant drinking nearby turned and froze. When he saw Dory and Brogy, his wooden cup clattered to the floor and wine spilled everywhere. You, Captain Dory, Captain Brogy. It took him a moment to regain composure. Kashi, Oimo, did you bring the captains back? Well done. Kashi and Oimo hung their heads, sheepish and embarrassed. Being duped by the world government into guarding a gate for 40 years was hardly a boast. The tavern filled with laughter. Giants laughed loudly at anything amusing. Reading poked fun at the brothers' misfortune, then grew serious and looked at Kane. Little brother Kane, thank you. If it weren't for you, the captains and Kashi might never have returned. No need to keep thanking me. If you want to show your gratitude, how about treating us to Elbaf's finest wine? Kane said, waving a hand. Reading pounded his chest and declared, no problem, drinks on me. We won't leave until we're all good and drunk. The tavern erupted. To the giants, that meant an excuse to drink and be merry. Kane could already see why giant society had bred rowdy pirates, celebrate at every turn, and precise industry rarely followed. Mato bustled to serve drinks. If Gan knew this, he'd be overjoyed. Who's Gan? Dory and Brogy both asked. They'd been away too long. The younger generation were strangers. Reading grinned. Gan's the king's eldest son, my apprentice. He's grown into a proper Elbaf warrior and even formed his own giant warrior pirates. He set off with the dream of meeting you two as his model. By now, they should be nearly home. Kashi felt a pang of emotion. When he left, looking for the captains, Gan had been only 30. Now he'd become a full-fledged warrior. He asked casually, how's King Harold? Is he still pushing for Elbaf to join the world government? The tavern's silence hit like a physical thing. The laughter died. Faces fell and eyes went down. The air tightened. What's wrong? Did I say something? Kashi asked, confused. Reading's grin vanished. Sorrow had settled over him. King Harold died 7 years ago. Dory, Brogy, Kashi, and Oimo felt the world tilt. It couldn't be. Harold was not even 200 years old. He should have been in the prime of his life. Chapter 167, Loki's story. It's all because of that cursed prince. A red-faced giant slammed his fist on the table and snarled. The other giants around him wore the same expressions of disgust and outrage. Yamato, Robin, and Kozuki Hiyori exchanged glances, surprise and curiosity playing across their faces. It felt like they'd walked into the middle of an explosive piece of gossip. Only Kane, who already knew part of the story, remained calm, savoring the amber giant wine in his cup and nodding slightly in approval. The giants might be rough, but their wine was rich, strong, and had a long finish. Not surprising, given their long lifespans and their access to aged vintages. Prince? You mean Harridan? Dory and Brogy sounded puzzled. Brogy scratched his massive helmet. Didn't we just praise that kid for doing well? No, not Prince Harridan. Reading shook his head. A muscle twitched in his face as a complicated mix of anger, resentment, and almost pity showed through. It's Loki, King Harold's second son. Under the solemn attention of the room, Reading began to tell the story of Elbaf's royal line and the fate that followed Loki. He explained the background. Harridan's mother, Ida, was a common giant. King Harold had met during his travels. They fell in love and had Harridan. Though Harold wanted to marry Ida and make her queen, the people of Elbaf would not accept an outsider in the royal family. Harold eventually gave up and married Esterida, the daughter of a respected Elbaf noble with ancient giant blood. From that marriage came Loki. From the day he was born, Reading said, his voice trembling slightly, a terrible rumor spread through the royal city. They called him the Child of Curse. As the whispering grew, so did a prophecy. The child Loki would one day bring about the destruction of the world. Reading paused, lifting his glass and drinking as if to steady himself. He continued with growing unease. The worst part, the prophecy began to seem true. Elbaf fell into a string of misfortunes. In the very year Loki was born, Elder Jorel, the hero, was killed by that damned Charlotte Linlin during the Winter Solstice Festival. At the same time, Elbaf saw rare disasters. Fires, storms, cold waves, abnormal weather ravaged our crops and fisheries. We suffered a famine the likes of which hadn't been seen in centuries. And when we had just barely survived that famine, a 10-year-old Loki began driving monstrous underworld beasts to attack villages and set fires. If it had ended there, Reading's voice grew hoarse with repressed fury. King Harold tried everything to make amends. We could have accepted all that as terrible misfortune and kept our distance, but his palm crashed onto the sturdy wine table with a thunderous bang, rattling the goblets. His eyes were bloodshot. He roared like a wounded lion. His most unforgivable crime was killing his own father and stealing the legendary devil fruit that had been passed down in Elbaf's royal family for generations. That's right, that cannot be forgiven. The tavern erupted. The giant's outrage shook the rafters. For their people, Loki's earlier transgressions might have been sins to be punished, but patricide was beyond the pale, a stain on the soul that could never be cleansed. Loki had defiled the honor of a warrior. Yamato clenched her fists, her face pale with disgust at the thought of patricide. Kane's expression, however, shifted into something complicated. He glanced at Yamato, thinking that in spite of appearances, she and Loki shared a similar extreme loyalty to those they loved. Reading's account softened briefly, revealing Loki's tragedy. Right after he was born, because of his strange destiny and snake-like eyes, his birth mother abandoned him in the dangerous underworld. He miraculously survived there, fought and killed countless terrifying beasts, and clawed his way back to the surface. But when he returned, the fallout from the Charlotte Linlin incident made his mother reject him again. After she died, his maternal uncle, swayed by prejudice, treated him cruelly. Loki's life had been shaped by malice and coldness from the start. If not for King Harold's awkward but sincere paternal love, a tiny candle lighting a corner of Loki's darkness, the Loki who later tried to save Elbaf might never have existed. So has Loki been caught? Dory pulled Kane back to the present. Reading shook his head, regret and anger clouding his features. No, after King Harold was murdered, Loki escaped in the chaos and disappeared without a trace. Kane. Yamato's eyes lit up. She grabbed Kane's arm. Let's help Elbaf capture that bastard Loki and bring him to justice. Her sudden fervor drew everyone's attention. Reading frowned and warned in a stern voice out of concern. Little human girl, Loki is no ordinary giant warrior. He has pure ancient giant blood. His strength is beyond what you imagine. Charging in would be nothing but a sacrifice. The others joined in, anxious about Loki's might and worried for the safety of these small newcomers. Sanji bristled at their tone as if personally insulted. Stepping forward, he announced loudly, Kane is a top-tier pirate with a bounty of 2.4 billion berries. How could some fugitive giant prince stand against him? 2.4 billion! The giants gaped. They were not completely cut off from the world. They knew what such a bounty implied. Sanji beamed with pride as the giant's shocked reactions pleased him. Kane watched, embarrassed by Sanji's over-the-top showmanship and the attention it drew. Dory and Brogy rose to back Kane. Kane is terrifyingly strong. Even if the two of us joined forces, we wouldn't stand a chance. The giant's eyes brightened. If Kane was a force no two of their captains could beat together, perhaps these humans could do what giants found difficult. But entrusting capture of a former prince embroiled in a royal scandal was a grave decision. Reading considered for a moment and offered, "Young Kane, and all of you who came from afar, if you're truly interested, I will take you to see Elder Yarul." Elder Yarul is the oldest and most respected elder in Elbaf. The matter of entrusting Loki's pursuit must be decided by him. Because Loki had committed patricide, he had no right to the throne. Elbaf preferred to leave the throne vacant over allowing a parricide to sully it. Presently, Elder Yarul handled affairs large and small. Kane agreed readily. It would be an honor to meet him. Yamato's idea had played right into Kane's hands. If he could take over Shanks's task to capture Loki, it would be a brilliant move, gain Elbaf's goodwill, perhaps learn the truth behind Loki's alleged patricide, and if possible, reconcile Loki with Elbaf. Loki, judging from the original stories, was a fearsome fighter, possibly emperor level, and one of the legendary Devil Fruits Rock's crew, sought long ago, could well have been the one Loki had eaten. Recruiting him would be a prize. They cut the welcome banquet short. After farewells to those staying to drink, Kane and his group followed Reading toward a village called West Village. West Village presented an odd sight. A beach made of fossilized branches from the Atom Tree, weathered smooth and set beneath a roaring waterfall that spilled down through the gaps. The beach had no tides, but the waterfall's constant crash kicked up waves that lapped the sand. "This is the Warrior's Spring," Reading explained. "The children love to play here, but it's still class time, so the little rascals are in their classrooms." Kane remembered something and turned to Robin with a strange smile. "Robin, there's an old friend of yours here. You'll be glad to see him." "An old friend?" Robin blinked. Giant friends? The thought startled her. Then a figure she had almost banished to memory, a presence she thought she'd never see again, struck her heart like lightning. She froze, trembling. Is it Saul? Kane, tell me, is it Saul?" She stared at him as if his answer could either shatter her hope or make it real. Reading, overhearing, said quietly, You know Teacher Saul too?" "Oh, so he met you during his travels at sea, did he?" Those words broke the last reserve in Robin's chest. Tears filled her dark eyes. Saul, her friend and benefactor, was truly here. Confirmation from another giant made the reunion feel real. "Is it true? Is Saul really here?" "Of course," Reading said. "About 15 years ago, Saul and his companions returned to Elbaf with a collection of precious books. King Harold asked him to help start a school, so Saul established the Walrus School. It's right over there." He pointed to a large, charming building beside the Warrior's Spring. Atop it, a naive walrus head wearing an academic cap served as an ornament. As they approached, the sound of children reading aloud floated from inside. Reading smiled, a little exasperated. That little rascal, Koro's not paying attention in class again. Now that Saul's presence was confirmed, Kane and his group had no hurry to see Elder Yarul. They waited patiently outside the school until the children were dismissed. "Goodbye, teacher. Goodbye, everyone." More than a dozen giant children spilled out of the classroom like animals released from a pen, shouting and laughing. They clustered in little groups, arguing whether to play at the Warrior's Spring or explore the forest. The bright-eyed youngsters quickly noticed Kane and his small human companions and swarmed around them with curious excitement. "Are you Shanks's crew? I don't recognize you." A small boy with a horned helmet and messy pink hair that covered half his face stared fearlessly at Kane. His round eyes were bold and unabashed. Unlike the other giant children, he wore a wooden short sword tied properly at his waist. "We're enemies. Enemies with Shanks," Kane smiled. If he wasn't mistaken, this was Kroll, Lipri's son, the little spark of that famed giant family. "Enemies, huh?" Kroll's eyes widened. Instead of hostility, curiosity lit up his face. "Who won?" Before Kane could answer, Yamato, standing nearby, puffed out her chest and declared, voice full of pride, "Of course we won." "Wow, so amazing." Kroll's admiration was instantaneous. He looked up at Yamato eagerly. "Will you take me to sea? I want to be a pirate as strong as you." "No." Yamato's refusal was blunt and immediate. Kane almost smiled. She'd grown. She clearly understood not to promise kids wild adventures. But just when he was about to praise her restraint, Yamato added with a sneer, "You're too weak. Taking you would only slow us down." Kane's smile froze. Of course, this was Yamato. He held his forehead, unsurprised. If infant Loki had asked, she would have agreed without hesitation. Kroll, stung, pouted, but he didn't give up. Head tilted, he thought, then brightened. "Then when I'm strong, really, really strong, will you take me to sea?" That sounded more achievable than Shank's usual, "You're too young," replies. Kroll didn't realize that once he was truly strong, he wouldn't need anyone to take him anywhere. Yamato waved a hand, easily agreeing. "You can come." Kroll beamed, fists clenched, and swore loudly. "I'll get stronger." "Then you must eat well and train hard. No slacking." Yamato struck a big sister pose and lectured him. "Yes, I'll remember." Kroll nodded like a little chick pecking at rice. Reading stood quietly to the side, smiling as he watched the exchange. In giant culture, going to sea and becoming a pirate was a normal, and for many, necessary, part of growing up. It had once been one of the giant race's main ways to survive. "Kroll, why do you want to go to sea? It's dangerous," his friends protested at once. "Yeah, why leave peaceful Elbaf? It's safe here." Kroll gripped his wooden sword. His eyes shone with longing. To see the wide world, to challenge strong foes, that's the real romance of a man. The other boys couldn't understand. Then 3 giant girls stepped forward and scolded them. "Don't call people little humans. That's rude." Their presence alone silenced the boys. The girls' aura was enough to make the others bow their heads in apology. Kane watched in bemusement and waved them off. A natural reverence toward women. Was this a giant thing? Kozuki Hiyori, at his side, tugged his sleeve and whispered, a little bewildered, "Lord Kane, these giant children aren't at all what I imagined the warrior nation's descendants would be like." Elbaf prided itself on its warrior heritage, but the kids before them feared going to sea and had adopted surprisingly civil manners. Because Elbaf today isn't what it used to be. A gentle, clear voice answered. Everyone turned as a female giant with a neat ponytail and a warrior's facial paint approached. She wore an air of noble beauty. "Teacher Lipri!" the children cried, rushing to her. "Mama!" Kroll shouted happily. Lipri smiled, fondly ruffling heads and answering each greeting. Then she bent to study Kane with undisguised curiosity. "You're handsome. Not at all like the vicious pirate Shanks described." "You know Shanks?" one of Kane's companions asked, surprised. Lipri nodded. "My husband sailed with Shanks on the same ship for a long time." The companion's eyes widened. Shanks had been on just 2 ships, Red Force and the Oro Jackson, Roger's ship. To think a giant's husband had sailed with him, Kane hid any reaction to Shanks' reputation. Lipri continued, calm now. "I know about Captain Dory and the others who helped Elbaf. As long as your intentions toward Elbaf are honorable, our family won't stand in your way." Kane bowed. "Thank you." Lipri turned to her son, her tone soft but firm. "Kroll, if you want to go to sea, you must train seriously, eat well, and study. Understand?" At the word study, Kroll's face fell. "But Mama, I want to be a pirate." "Idiot." Lipri tapped his head, amused. "If you don't study navigation, you'll get lost. If you don't learn other cultures, you'll offend people. If you don't know medicine, you won't know how to treat wounds. How will you survive?" Kroll wilted, then nodded blankly under his mother's motherly lecture. Kane smiled inwardly. Now he understood why everyone respected the giant mothers. While Lipri fussed over Kroll, a large figure slipped from the shadowed doorway. He wore heavy burn scars across his face and body and a carved wooden leg. He moved cautiously, holding a finger to his lips to signal silence. He didn't notice Robin, who stood with her back turned, smiling with quiet anticipation. "Wah!" Saul suddenly lunged from the side, coming up beside Robin with a mock feral roar and a playfully terrifying pose. "Tai! How's that? Scared?" Robin's usual placid expression instantly cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. She stared at Saul with a mix of yearning and disbelief, taking in the scars on his skin and the wooden leg. The tears spilled silently, falling and leaving dark spots on the ground of Elbaf. Saul's exaggerated grin froze. He crouched and gently lifted Robin. He tried to speak, then forced a warm smile. "Robin, you've grown. Seeing you now, it's like seeing Olvia again." "I missed you so much, Saul." Robin couldn't hold back. She flung her arms around him and sobbed, as if 15 years of longing poured out in one embrace. Me too, Robin. Saul's voice broke. Tears, huge and shining, ran down his face and mingled with hers. The sight moved those watching. Hiyori and Violet brushed their cheeks discreetly, and Yamato and Reiju stood in silent respect at the depth of that friendship. An old giant with a thick beard and walrus-like features approached Kane's group. He looked at the reunited pair, eyes soft with relief. It's been a long while since I saw Saul so excited. Principal Chiba, Reading greeted respectfully. How have you been? Chiba laughed his booming laugh, but it turned into a sudden wince. Oh, my back. He clutched his lower back. Getting older, you can't do anything big or your back flares up. Kane dug into his coat and produced a small glass vial that glittered with a few drops of liquid, the healing tear. Principal Chiba, try this. It might help. Oh? Chiba didn't ask about its origin. He grabbed the vial and, without looking, crunched the glass between his walrus-like teeth and swallowed both glass and liquid. He immediately blinked in astonishment as a warm current eased his spine. Pain vanished. It feels like being young again. Chiba sighed with relief. Thank you, little brother Kane. No need to be formal, Kane said, waving him away. But it only treats symptoms. Take care of yourself. Ha ha ha. One comfortable day is worth a lot at my age. Chiba chuckled. He seemed to warm toward Kane, his attitude noticeably friendly. You really are, as folks like Dory said, straightforward and passionate. Kane glanced at the children at the Warrior's Spring, and his expression grew serious. Principal Chiba, forgive me, but with the education you promote now, are you really planning to let Elbaf's next generation lose the pride and fighting spirit that defends this homeland? Chiba's smile faded as he explained. This is King Harold's long-view policy. We're abandoning barbaric labels, plunder, conquest, violence, to be accepted by other nations. Elbaf's reputation in the world is terrible. Without change, we can't build equal diplomatic relations. Kane's eyes sharpened. I understand the need for diplomacy, but abandoning the ability to fight and the will to defend is like gambling your survival on others' kindness. Your current warriors might protect Elbaf for 100, maybe 200 years. What about after that? Do you expect children raised in a greenhouse to survive a cruel sea full of pirates? Pirates are ruthless. If you lay down your swords, other nations will see Elbaf as fertile ground to pillage. Several giant teachers who had themselves sailed and seen the world fell silent. Kane's point was hard to deny. Many pirates had no conscience. Chiba's face grew grave and weary. It's the king's decision. We can't change it. Besides, there is no king now. Wolf, the PE teacher, added, I've tried to include combat training in classes, but the children have adapted to this peaceful Elbaf. It's difficult. Kane's voice softened, but was resolute. He thought of the children and their sheltered lives. Then, like lightning, a thought flashed through his mind, startling and unbidden. Perhaps he could be their king. On the other side of the courtyard, Saul led Robin, Kozuki Hiyori, Reiju, Kuma's daughter, and the others toward the Owl Library. Inside, the space was cavernous, with towering wooden shelves packed tightly with oversized volumes salvaged from Ohara. This is the largest library in Elbaf. All the books I recovered from Ohara are here, Saul announced with pride. The group stared. So the world government didn't destroy every book from Ohara? Robin asked, trembling with excitement. They're all here, Saul said, nodding slowly. He told them how, after Kuzan had frozen him, the ice on Ohara melted and he fell into the sea, yet he survived. Months later, he returned with giants and salvaged the books hidden in the lakebed. Looking back, Kuzan must have spared me on purpose. A complex expression crossed Saul's face. He's cold, but deep down, there's warmth. Saul shook off the darker memories and turned to Robin. At first, I feared every day that I'd read about your death in a newspaper. Then I heard you joined the Beast's Pirates, an Emperor-level crew, and I was terrified you were enslaved or exploited. Seeing you now, with friends around you, I can relax. Robin, you found people who accept and protect you, he said earnestly. Robin smiled, warmth radiating. Saul leaned forward and asked solemnly, Everyone, please keep taking care of Robin. Kuma's daughter answered with calm assurance, Of course, Robin is important to us. Bonnie puffed up her small fists. Bonnie will protect Sister Robin. Reiju smiled and added, Robin has grown strong. She can protect herself. Tears welled again in Saul's eyes. He introduced the library's curator, Baburo, an old owl with the berry fruit ability. He could enlarge inorganic objects in his sight. Because of Baburo, human newspapers and the Ohara texts could be read by the giants. While the group wandered, awed by the giant library, Kane's attention was drawn to another figure approaching. The current leader of Elbaf, the former captain of the giant warrior pirates, the world's oldest warrior, Elder Hero Yaruru. Chapter 169. The Murals of Elbaf, the King's Arena. So big, he's as tall as a giant. Yamato craned her neck, eyes wide with undisguised amazement. She pointed at the towering figure and then tapped her chin, frowning. Strange, why do you have a sword stuck in your head? Wait, shouldn't the question be how he's still alive with a sword in his head? Violet's common sense protested loudly, her eyes nearly popping out. Oh, you mean this? Yaruru raised a gnarled hand and poked the hilt of the sword lodged above his brow. He spoke calmly. Thanks to this helmet, I barely clung to life. But the sword is already stuck in there, Violet exclaimed. What exactly did the helmet protect? Yaruru blinked as if belatedly noticing, then shrugged. Violet's eye twitched. She leaned toward Kane and whispered, Do you think this old giant got his head pricked and went senile? Can he still rule Elbaf like this? Maybe he's just very old, Kane replied noncommittally. Yaruru was 401 years old, by human standards well over 100. That he could speak coherently at all was a miracle. Reading stepped forward and respectfully explained Kane's group's intent to Yaruru. We intend to capture Loki. Capture Loki? Yaruru stroked his long, snow-white beard that trailed to the ground, thinking for a moment. Then I'll trouble you, though it's embarrassing to admit, these days in Elbaf, there really isn't anyone stronger than Loki. He changed his tone, choosing his words with care. But could I ask you to try to capture him alive? I don't know why, but I feel there may be more to what happened back then. Of course. Kane nodded readily. He knew Loki was innocent. Unlucky, yes, but innocent. The only one who could prove it, Yaruru, had suffered a severe head injury and had no memory of the event. After Kane accepted the Loki mission, he brought up another reason for visiting Elbaf. Since Elbaf has opened its borders and seeks friendly relations with human nations, why not consider forming an alliance with the beast's pirates? Our sphere of influence covers a full quarter of the New World. By allying with us, Elbaf would instantly gain friendly ties with dozens of human kingdoms. Kane's voice was persuasive, painting an enticing picture. An alliance? Yaruru frowned and shook his head slowly. We in Elbaf have decided to abandon past violent actions. We will not help the beast's pirates fight in wars. He didn't entirely close the door, though. If you can persuade other giants to willingly help, I will not stand in their way as an elder. His meaning was clear. Individual giants could choose, but Elbaf as a nation would not enter into military binding with a pirate crew. If Kane sought merely to raise a giant army, Yaruru's caveat essentially delivered him that. But Kane wanted more than soldiers. He wanted to bind all of Elbaf to his enterprise. The alliance I propose isn't a military pact, Kane said. It's a deeper industrial cooperation. He laid out his blueprint. Elbaf, he said, still depended on imports for almost everything but basic goods. Because of giants' unique physiques, outside products rarely fit. Why not make them yourselves? Kane painted a vivid picture of progress. Stable electric lights, tractors to revolutionize farming, refrigeration to preserve food, trade in factories, a modern standard of living. Dorian Brogy watched with rapt attention. Kane spoke with his full force, offering concrete, attractive plans. Even Yaruru, steady and solemn, felt the tug of possibility. In the end, he composed himself and said as calmly as he could, "This is a grave matter. We will need time to discuss it." "Take all the time you need," Kane replied, unhurried. Yaruru would consult scholars, debate scriptures. This deliberation lasted a day. As night fell, Kane's group gathered again in a small tavern. Robin excitedly recounted what she'd learned during the day. "The giant race preserves an ancient mural dating from the Void Century," she said. "It depicts 3 successive worlds. The legend says the first 2 worlds were destroyed. We live in the third." She recited the mural's prophecy in an almost epic tone. The sun god dances and laughs, leading the world to its end. Kane listened quietly. To him, the third mural seemed straightforward. It depicted the sun god Nika leading a coalition of races to defeat the demon Emu. Sun god? Nika? He destroys the world? Bonnie's small face filled with fear. She clutched her father's arm. Papa, isn't Nika the liberator who brings freedom? She asked. Kuma gently patted her head and chuckled. Don't worry, Bonnie. It's just a mural. Even if the world ends, Papa will protect you. Robin offered a different reading. Nika's image in the world is positive, active, liberating. I think the end in the mural doesn't mean destruction. It means ending the old order of rule. She grew serious. The celestial dragons. Her words hung heavy in the tavern. The companions' faces turned grave. The celestial dragons had ruled the world for 800 years. Could the mural be saying someone would overthrow them? Yamato suddenly chimed in casually. Isn't that what we're doing now? The tension broke. For a moment, everyone was startled. Then laughter bubbled up and eased the mood. Violet nudged Yamato. Maybe you're the sun god, Yamato, always laughing and dancing. So I am the sun god, Nika. Yamato struck a pose, half joking, half serious. Don't say that, everyone protested, partly amused. Eneru, ever disdainful, scoffed. If the mural doesn't show me, it must be false. Kane glanced at him. Eneru's arrogance was unshakable. Still, the mural did include figures of moon people, so Eneru's dismissal wasn't entirely justified. Sanji, suddenly thoughtful, asked, if the mural is a prophecy, does that mean the one who overthrows the celestial dragons in the future won't be Big Brother Kane? Kane smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Sanji first nodded, then shook his head with conviction. No, the one who overthrows the celestial dragons must be Big Brother Kane. Kane smiled at the unwavering faith around him. Prophecies are excuses for cowards. I believe people can conquer nature. He laughed, and the sound carried a charisma that stirred everyone. Only you, Kane, can be king of the world. His crew echoed him, their blood fired up. Who cared about ancient murals? They would follow Kane into any abyss with laughter. Even Eneru allowed a grudging hum of compliance. Outside, Yararuru's booming voice called. Dory and Brogy stood with him. Because of Yararuru's towering height, he could only stand outside the tavern while speaking with Kane. Kane, Dory and Brogy told me what they saw in Wano, Yararuru said solemnly. I agree in principle to friendly relations with the beast's pirates, but that but made everyone's hearts hitch. There is no king, Yararuru continued. Many giant villages do not fully obey my orders. Elbaf was still a loose feudal realm. Villages all over the Atom Tree were nominally under the king, but Giant's violent independence made rebellion common when policies displeased them. When Harold had sought to end plundering and civilize the nation, many villages resisted. Only Harold's personal strength imposed order. Kane faced the same problem. Not every giant wanted modernization. Many still prized glory through raiding over farming or industry. Simple, Kane said with a smile. Let's have a fight. Under Yararuru's and the others' shocked stares, he added, Elbaf is a warrior nation. What better way to settle this than by fists and battle? Yararuru hesitated. He had grown reluctant to rely solely on violence to solve problems after Harold. Dory's eyes lit up. Elder Yararuru, doesn't Elbaf have an ancient trial passed down long ago? The King's Arena. Yararuru dug up the name from dusty memories. The King's Arena? Brogy, excited, explained roughly. It's an ancient Elbaf trial. Whenever the throne is vacant and giants argue over who should lead, the trial is activated. The rules are simple. The king candidate accepts challenges from all giant warriors in the sacred arena and must stand until the end. The time limit is 7 days and 7 nights, so it's called the 7-day trial. But it's only in legend. It hasn't been used for hundreds of years. It was no easy feat, even for giants, to withstand the non-stop attacks of all challengers. Kane was stunned. This tradition was a godsend. He almost couldn't help smiling. But Brogy hesitated, looking at Kane. Even in legend, there has never been a precedent of a human taking the challenge. At that, Yararuru moved quickly. Times change. Elbaf must adapt. If the nation is well governed, why should we care whether the king is a giant or not? He had grown old and knew his hold on power was as much about prestige as nostalgia. If Kane could deliver a better life to Elbaf, handing rule to him would be wise. Yararuru looked Kane in the eye, his aged face solemn. Kane, will you take part in the trial? This is a battle of a warrior's honor and life. It's not child's play. Kane's smile vanished. He was serious. For Elbaf's future and for the beast's pirates, I will not shirk my duty. He added candidly, if later you find a more suitable king, I will gladly abdicate. He did not hide his motives. He wanted to build and profit, but he promised it would be a mutual benefit. Yaruru's tension eased at Kane's honesty. I'll go persuade the clansmen right away, he said, and that night Yaruru, Dory, and Brogy set out to speak with the village elders. On the walk, Brogy seemed troubled. Tell me, what's with your sudden hesitation? How have you become so indecisive after a few years at sea? Yaruru read his thought and asked bluntly. Brogy ground his teeth. Do we really have to let a human be king? He's helped us. I'd die for him, but making an outsider, the wrong kind of outsider, the king, it's awkward. Yaruru shook his head and a distant light came into his eyes. You're wrong. In more ancient times, there was an outsider who did the same. What? Who? That man was named Joy Boy. The next morning, just as the first rays cut through Elbaf's sea fog, a deep, resonant horn blast echoed across the island. The assembly horn? Are enemies coming? Giants everywhere dropped what they were doing and poured into their village squares. The elders were already waiting. In almost every village, the same announcement came, earth-shaking and impossible to ignore. The king's arena has been activated. Giants froze. Then excitement and fever spread as they remembered the ancient trial. Who is it? Who dares to trigger the king's arena? Only a few years since the throne was vacant, and someone already seeks it? Ha! Could it be that brat Hajrudin? He dreams of being the giant king. The elders did not leave them in suspense. The challenger is Kane. Kane, who's that? Whispers surged. A human pirate? Humans can challenge the king's arena? The square erupted. Tempers flared, and some giants roared that they would rip the presumptuous human apart rather than let him desecrate Elbaf's glory. The elders coughed to restore order and declared in solemn voices, "This is the united decision of the elders. If you do not want a human king, then defeat him fair and square in the arena." The elders' authority was absolute. The debate about Kane's legitimacy vanished like mist. Now every giant focused on the same thing. Who would be the one to crush the human challenger? And if Kane could stand undefeated until the end, his claim to the throne would be unquestionable. Elbaf answered only to absolute strength. Fate, it seemed, had given Kane a fighting chance. Chapter 170, Arena Challenge, Victory Nishimura, on a seaside cliff. Perched on the edge with an excellent view, a sturdy wooden house sent wisps of steam from its open windows. Ah, this is the life. Waking up and soaking in a hot bath. Nothing beats it. An old man with gray hair and beard, still robust despite his years, relaxed in the hot tub, watching the scenery. Steam blurred the flame-shaped scar above his right eye. His powerful arms rested on the tub's edge. The muscles remained clearly defined, proof that time hadn't erased the strength inside him. Opposite the bath, an unusually spacious dining room hosted a mother and son eating breakfast. "Dad, hurry up! The King's Arena trial is about to start," the little boy Kuran urged, his freckled face eager as he wrestled with the mountain of food before him, his words a little breathless. Lipley didn't answer immediately. She rose and leaned over the tub, smiling playfully at the old man. "Ashan, how's the water? Want me to add more hot water?" Kuran instantly dropped his face and began to wail. Watching their son's disappointed but reluctant expression, Ashan burst into hearty laughter, his boom startling several seabirds on the cliff. "No need, Lipley. If I soak any longer, that little fellow will really start stamping his feet. Ha! Besides, this is a rare thing. Even I'm seeing it for the first time." Lipley straightened, her tones soft with feeling. "I still don't know how Kane convinced the elders." "We don't need to worry." Ashan shrugged as the water rippled. "Elder Yaruru is a sensible man. Any decision he makes will be for the good of Elbaf." After a few more leisurely minutes, Ashan rose from the tub, dried himself quickly, pushed on a pair of small round sunglasses, and slipped into a brightly colored Hawaiian shirt and loose shorts, instantly transforming from an old man in a bath into a spirited, fashionable elder. "Let's go. I want to see what Kane can really do." The family of three left the house and headed to the Elbaf Colosseum, the venue for the King's Arena trial. Built from massive, roughly hewn stones, the Colosseum was the largest and most formidable structure in all of Elbaf, designed to withstand the brutal clashes of giant warriors. By the time they arrived, the Colosseum was a sea of people. Giant after giant packed the stands, the noise deafening. Some stood with arms crossed, their faces alight with anticipation. Others rubbed their fists, eyes burning with the desire to fight. Still more whispered excitedly among themselves. The whole place felt like a pot about to boil over. Because they were late, Ashin's family found seats in the highest tier. Wow, so many people. Kuran's huge round eyes darted around, never tiring of the sight. Lipley watched the crowd surge below and said softly to Ashan, "It's spectacular. Everyone's come for the King's Arena trial, and for Kane, the human challenger." Ashan pushed up his sunglasses and nodded. On the vast floor of the Colosseum, Yoru and several respected elders sat at the host's table, and Kane's group waited near them. "I declare the King's Arena trial, lasting 7 days, officially open." No long speeches. Yoru's bell-like voice rang out, and the challenge that would decide Elbaf's future began. A thunderous battle cry erupted from the stands, the roar nearly tearing the Colosseum's roof. Every giant felt their blood surge, their fighting spirit blazing. The collective breathing was a single thundering sound. The air had already reached a fever pitch even before the fight began. Kane stood in the center of the arena and felt the primal intensity. He nodded inwardly. This was the warrior nation he'd expected. "I'll go first," a furious roar answered. A giant dressed like a Viking, wielding a massive axe, leaped from the high stands and landed with a crash, sending dust flying. "It's Ogre Jason, one of the strongest warriors from East Village." Giants who knew him cheered. Jason called out, "Human, get ready, I'm coming." He swung his axe at Kane. Before the blade could reach Kane, the wind pressure from that massive swing whipped Kane's hair and robes as if trying to shred his slender frame. Kane's face didn't change. Calmly, he raised his right hand. "Got him," he said casually. The giant's battle face turned to joy. He thought the human would be crushed. "Under my giant axe, ugh!" His shout froze mid-sentence. The axe felt as if it had struck an adamant trunk. It wouldn't move forward or back, held by an irresistible force. Jason's veins popped, his arm muscles rock hard as he used every ounce of strength, but the axe remained welded in place. A cold bead of sweat rolled down his temple. The stands erupted. Giants stared in disbelief. That tiny human had actually stopped Jason's full-power chop with one hand? No, worse, 2 fingers? 2 tiny fingers had held the axe. "Did you skip breakfast?" Kane teased, amused. "You're so weak you make me sleepy." Jason's face went from pale to flushed to ashen as Kane chuckled and let go. The axe slid past Kane's side from inertia. Jason's expression flickered with hope, but before he could react, a massive impact came up the axe handle. Pain tore through his hands, and the tiger's mouth of his palm went numb, forcing him to drop the axe. Just as it clanged to the ground, a phantom-like figure appeared beside his massive head. "See ya." A fist, wildly out of proportion to Kane's small frame, yet carrying a force that defied its size, smashed into Jason's left cheek. "Ooh-ah!" Jason's eyes rolled back, and his consciousness left his body. He flew backward as if hit by a dump truck, teeth flying from his mouth. Kane landed lightly and looked up at the restless stands. Next, the giants weren't cowed. A warrior even bigger than Jason roared and leaped in, only to be swept out of the ring moments later by Kane's clean over-the-shoulder throw. 2 giants had fallen in quick succession. Scattered cheers began to ripple through the crowd. "Kane! Kane! Kane!" Kuran's shout was the loudest, bouncing off the stands. Ashin didn't stop his son. He only sighed and said to Lipley, "No wonder Shanks lost to Kaido. Kaido's officers had that kind of strength. Shanks's loss wasn't entirely unwarranted." Kane showed no hint of complacency after beating 2 giants. "That's barely a warm-up," he said, shaking his head with faint disappointment. Then he lifted his gaze, sweeping the noisy stands like lightning. A provocative smirk tugged one corner of his mouth. "One by one is a waste of time, all of you." His voice rose so it carried to every corner. "Come at me together!" "What?" the crowd shouted. "Arrogant!" "You think those 2 represent the best of Elbaf?" The stands boiled over. Kane turned to Yoru and the elders. "One against many? Does that violate the rules?" Yoru stroked his snowy beard. "The rules only say challengers must enter one by one. They don't limit defenders." "Kane, are you sure?" the old man asked, eyes probing. Kane was relaxed. "Of course. Then as you wish." With Yoruru's approval, the giants debated briefly and then reached a decision. Let the Bear Brothers go. They're survivors of 7 days in the underworld and returned. They'll win for sure. A pair of twin warriors crashed into the arena, each wielding a greatsword half their height. With fierce eyes and imposing presence, they moved without words. In perfect sync, they raised their blades and channeled violent power into them. Hakai! They swung together. A red and a blue energy wave burst from their swords, twisting and merging into a gigantic shockwave column. The air screamed and the ground furrowed as the shockwave gouged everything in its path. Kane finally looked serious. Armament hockey covered his body, and then he did something that left the giants speechless. He didn't dodge. He stomped, became a black meteor, and charged straight into the destructive shockwave. Take down! Under thousands of horrified gazes, the black figure plunged into the shockwave and shattered it where it passed. How? The twin brothers barely had time to react before pain struck their chests. Their vision went dark and they crashed to the ground unconscious. The defeat of the highly anticipated Bear Brothers stunned the giants. The human before them was not someone they could handle in a one-on-one fight. Charge together! Someone roared, and in an instant, giants poured from the spectator stands like dumplings dropping into boiling water. The once packed seats emptied by more than half, leaving only the elderly, the weak, women, and children behind. Kane was soon surrounded by a living wall of giant bodies, pressuring him from all sides. Thousands of burning eyes looked down. The heavy breathing felt like a physical weight. Kane, at the storm center, closed his eyes. He tapped his foot, light and springy, and began a warm-up, arms and legs stretching and moving in a sequence like Satori's exercises. He looked relaxed, almost as if enjoying himself. Half a minute later, he opened his eyes. A sharp light flared, and a wild smile stretched his lips. That's it. Come on, don't waste time. He charged first, crashing into the copper and iron barrier of giant bodies. Dragon Claw, Dragon Tail, Iron Head, Brick Break. Kane's voice named each strike as his body moved through gaps between legs, feet, and weapons. His fists, feet, elbows, knees, even his head became deadly weapons. Facing that relentless onslaught, no giant stood up to him. Most fell unconscious with a single strike, collapsing in various postures. Kane restrained himself where he could. He didn't want mass casualties. The giants were thick-skinned and durable, otherwise today might have been Elbaf's Ragnarok. So strong, the elders watching below murmured. This absolute power, I've only seen it in King Harold and Loki. Now they understood why Yoruru had granted Kane the trial. This wasn't a fair test, it was an overwhelming victory. This human had the terrifying power to flatten all of Elbaf on his own. As expected of Big Brother Kane, a super pirate with a bounty of 2.4 billion, Kuran's eyes glowed as he watched, waving his small hands. Lipley turned to Ashan and asked softly, "If it were you, could you beat him?" Ashan was quiet for a moment, melancholy flickering across his face. "If I were 20 years younger, maybe I could give him a fight, but now, if I risked this old life, I probably wouldn't last long." Lipley only nodded, looking at the invincible figure in the ring with a new solemnity. "Damn, I'm so envious of Kane. He gets to fight so many giants." Yamato, like a salted fish that had lost its dreams, slumped against the railing and watched Kane moving freely among the siege below, her voice a defeated sigh. "I want that." Reiju patted her shoulder gently. "There will be opportunities." Nearby, Eneru munched on an apple and scowled. Damn, how had this guy grown even stronger? How long before a god could avenge himself? Saul, sitting with Robin, wore a face of shock. "Robin, your companion is terrifyingly powerful." "Of course he is," Robin replied with a sweet smile and a hint of pride. "Not long ago, Marine Admiral Sakazuki and Admiral Kuzan fell to him." "Oh, really? That's incredible." Saul's astonishment deepened. Sakazuki, Kuzan, and Borsalino had been monsters since the Marine Academy, recognized as future admirals and even fleet admirals. Time passed amid varied conversations. In the arena, the fight became assembly line. One giant after another roared and charged, then went down, dragged away by the logistics and treatment teams for emergency care. Giants from across Elbaf kept arriving to join. The sun set and rose. To avoid excessive casualties, Kane avoided large-scale destructive attacks, so the struggle stretched on. Even with his monstrous endurance, under continuous relays of hundreds of giants, His body accrued injuries. His clothes were torn, and his appearance grew more battered than when he had first stepped into the ring. Fortunately, once a giant was defeated and later recovered, they didn't rejoin the battle. What felt endless had an end. Finally, bang! Kane's straight punch sent the last standing giant to the ground. The man was hauled away by the crew. The day and night melee at last drew to a temporary close. The stands, emptied by warriors entering the ring, filled again, this time with giants wearing bandages and bruises. Kane breathed in deeply, suppressed his exhaustion, and raised his arm. The reply was no longer a challenge, but a massive unified cheer like a mountain's roar and a tsunami at once. Kane, 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 King, King, King. After that epic non-stop head-on clash that had lasted a day and a night, Kane, by virtue of undeniable strength and unbending will, had earned the heartfelt respect of the vast majority of giants present.